Hey everyone, and welcome back to Uncle Sam Fun English. I'm Theus.
And I'm Belle. Ready for another useful lesson?
Absolutely. Today we're diving into the Real Talk Map. 10 situations where textbook English fails you.
It's frustrating when what you learned in class doesn't work in real life.
We're going to bridge that gap and equip you with practical English for real conversations.
Let's get started.
So Belle, why is it that sometimes what we learn in textbooks just doesn't seem to work when we're actually talking to people in English?
That's a great question, Theus. Textbook English is often very formal and focuses on perfect grammar, but real-life conversations are much more casual and full of slang, idioms, and shortcuts. A common mistake is using overly formal phrases like, "How do you do?" instead of a simple, "Hi."
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I remember trying to use some of the vocabulary I learned in a textbook when I first moved here, and people just looked at me strangely. Have you had any similar experiences?
Absolutely. I think a lot of learners focus too much on memorizing lists of words without understanding how they're actually used in context. That's why their English sounds unnatural. People don't always speak in perfectly constructed sentences.
Exactly. For example, textbooks might teach you to say, "I am going to the store," but in reality, most people would just say, "I'm going to the store," or even, "I'm gonna go to the store."
Right. Or even just, going to the store. The problem is textbooks often oversimplify things or present ideal versions of conversations that rarely happen in the real world. That can lead to awkwardness and misunderstandings.
Okay, so here are a few more examples I've encountered. Textbooks often emphasize using very before adjectives, like very happy or very sad. But native speakers often use more descriptive and interesting words, like thrilled or devastated.
Precisely. And another one is using formal greetings in casual settings. For example, if you walk into a coffee shop and say, "Good morning, esteemed sir or madam," you're going to get some weird looks. A simple, "Hi," or "Hey," is much more appropriate.
Another classic. Directly translating phrases from your native language. Sometimes it works, but often it leads to completely nonsensical sentences in English.
Definitely. I think a lot of learners rely too heavily on direct translation, which can be a huge pitfall. It's important to understand the nuances of the English language and how native speakers actually express themselves. The impact of these errors is that you can be misunderstood, or even worse, come across as rude or unnatural.
So how do we fix this disconnect between textbook English and real-world English? What's the solution for students who want to sound more natural and confident?
The key is to expose yourself to authentic English as much as possible, such as movies, TV shows, podcasts, and conversations with native speakers. And pay attention to how people actually talk. Okay, so let's start with a big one: ordering food. Textbooks teach you phrases like, "I would like," which, while grammatically correct, sounds a bit stiff in a casual setting.
Yeah, I've definitely felt awkward saying, "I would like," at a burger joint. What's a better way to order?
A much more natural approach is simply saying, "I'll have," or "Can I get?" For example, instead of, "I would like a cheeseburger," say, "I'll have a cheeseburger," or "Can I get a cheeseburger, please?"
So, if I'm at a coffee shop, instead of, "I would like a latte," I should say, "I'll have a latte," or "Can I get a latte?" Is that right?
Exactly. It's shorter, more direct, and much more common in everyday conversation. Using "I would like" isn't wrong, but it's often perceived as overly formal, almost like you're talking to royalty.
Okay, so let me try another one. If I'm at a restaurant and I want the steak, should I say, "I'll have the steak," or "Can I get the steak, please?"
Perfect. You got it. Now, let's add a little nuance. If you're looking at the menu and want to confirm something, you might say, "I'll take the steak," which implies a decision you've just made.
So, "I'll have the steak" is more general, and "I'll take the steak" is more specific, like I've already decided?
Precisely. And remember to add, "please," to be polite. Now, consider this. You're at a restaurant, and the waiter asks, "What can I get for you?" How would you respond?
Maybe, "I'll have the pasta, please," or "Can I get the pasta, please?"
Great. Those are perfect. You could also say, I'd like the pasta, please, in that context. It's slightly more formal but still acceptable because the waiter initiated the interaction.
So, it depends on who starts the conversation and the overall atmosphere of the place.
Exactly. Context is key. If you're in a fancy restaurant, I would like might feel more appropriate, but in most casual settings, I'll have, or can I get, is the way to go.
Got it. So, avoiding sounding too formal is the name of the game here?
Absolutely. It's about sounding natural and fitting in with the conversation around you. Another example, imagine you're at a bar. You wouldn't say, I would like a beer.
Right, that sounds strange. I'd probably say, I'll have a beer, or, can I get a beer, please?
Exactly. You're nailing it. Now, let's say you want to order something specific, like a particular brand of beer. How would you phrase that?
Maybe, can I get a Budweiser, please? Or, I'll have a Budweiser.
Perfect. You can also just say, Budweiser, please. It's short, clear, and everyone will understand. The key is to be clear and concise.
Okay, so to recap, I'll have, or, can I get, are generally better options than, I would like, when ordering food or drinks in most situations.
Precisely. You've got it. This little tweak will make you sound much more natural and confident when ordering in English.
So, Belle, what about situations where the textbook teaches us a phrase, but it just sounds off in real life? Like, are there specific scenarios where we should avoid certain textbook phrases?
Absolutely, Theus. One common example is overly formal greetings. Textbooks often teach phrases like, how do you do? But in everyday conversation, it sounds extremely stiff and unnatural.
Right, I remember using, how do you do? When I first arrived in the US, and people looked at me like I was from another century. What's a better alternative?
A simple, hi, how's it going? Or, hey, what's up, is much more appropriate and friendly in most casual settings. Even just, hi, works perfectly well.
Okay, that makes sense. So, formality levels are key. Are there other examples where textbook English leads us astray like that?
Definitely. Another area is overly polite requests. Textbooks sometimes emphasize phrases like, would you be so kind as to, which can sound overly elaborate and even sarcastic in certain situations.
Would you be so kind as to pass the salt? Yeah, that sounds like something a villain would say in a movie.
Exactly. A simple, could you pass the salt, please, is much more direct and natural. Or even just, pass the salt, please, depending on your relationship with the person.
So, we should aim for directness and simplicity in most everyday requests. Got it. What about expressing disagreement? Are there textbook phrases that can come across as too aggressive?
Yes, absolutely. Textbook English might teach phrases like, I completely disagree, which can sound very confrontational.
I can see that. It's like you're starting a fight. What's a more diplomatic way to express disagreement?
Softening the language is key. You could say, I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective, or I'm not sure I completely agree, and here's why.
So you acknowledge their point of view first before presenting your own. That's a great tip. Anything else we should watch out for?
Another common pitfall is using overly complex vocabulary when simpler words would suffice. Textbooks sometimes introduce advanced words that native speakers rarely use in everyday conversation.
I've definitely been guilty of that, trying to sound smart and just ending up sounding weird.
Exactly. For example, instead of saying, I'm currently endeavoring to ascertain the veracity of this information, you could simply say, I'm trying to find out if this information is true.
That's a huge difference. So, keep it simple and use words that come naturally. Is there a risk of sounding too formal when offering help?
Yes, there is. Textbooks might suggest phrases like, may I be of assistance, which, while polite, sounds a bit dated and formal in most modern contexts.
May I be of assistance? Sounds like I'm a butler in a period drama.
Precisely. A more natural and friendly way to offer help is to say, can I help you with that? Or, do you need a hand?
Much more approachable. So, avoid sounding like a robot and aim for genuine helpfulness. What about expressing gratitude?
This is another area where nuance is important. While, thank you very much, is perfectly acceptable. It can sometimes sound a bit generic.
So, how can we make our expressions of gratitude more sincere and impactful?
Adding a specific reason why you're grateful can make a big difference. For example, instead of just saying, "Thank you very much," you could say, "Thank you so much for your help with this project. I really appreciate it."
That makes sense. Specificity shows that you truly value their effort. Any other phrases we should reconsider?
Yes, another one is overly formal apologies. Textbooks might teach phrases like, "I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience caused," which can sound a bit stiff and insincere, especially in casual situations.
It sounds like a corporate apology after a massive scandal.
Exactly. A simple, "I'm sorry," or "I apologize," is often sufficient, especially if you follow it up with a brief explanation of what happened and how you'll prevent it from happening again.
So, sincerity and taking responsibility are more important than using fancy words. What about responding to compliments?
This is an interesting one. Textbooks often teach phrases like, "It was nothing," which, while intended to be humble, can sometimes come across as dismissive or even rude.
I can see that. It's like you're invalidating the other person's compliment.
Exactly. A better response is to simply say, "Thank you," or "Thank you, I appreciate that." You can also add a little detail, like, "Thank you, I worked really hard on it." Okay, let's consider ordering at a restaurant. Textbook English might tell you to say, "I want the steak." But in a real-world scenario, that can sound a bit demanding.
Right, it's not necessarily wrong, but it lacks that politeness we often aim for, especially with service staff. How could we make that sound better?
Instead, try something like, "I'd like the steak, please," or "Could I have the steak, please?" These phrases add a touch of courtesy that's often appreciated. You could even say, "I'll have the steak."
That makes a big difference. It's subtle, but it shows you're being considerate. And if you're finding this helpful, don't forget to subscribe to Uncle Sam Fun English.
Exactly. Another situation is negotiating a price at a market. Saying, "I want it for $10, might not get you very far. It's too direct.
True, that's almost confrontational. So, what's a better approach?
You could try, "Would you consider $10? Or, is there any flexibility on the price?" These phrases open a conversation rather than shutting it down.
That's a great point. It's about finding common ground. What about when you're asking for directions? Textbook English sometimes teaches very formal phrasing.
Yes, and that can sound quite unnatural. Imagine asking someone on the street, "Could you direct me to the nearest apothecary?" They might look at you strangely.
I can picture that. So, how would you ask for directions in a more natural, everyday way?
Try something like, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the post office?" Or, "Hey, is the library around here?" More casual and friendly.
That's perfect. It's about adapting your language to the context. Another place where textbook English can fail us is in expressing disagreement.
Oh, absolutely. Simply saying, "No, you're wrong," is rarely a good strategy, even if you believe it to be true. It's too blunt and can damage relationships.
How could we soften that and express disagreement more constructively?
Try phrases like, "I see your point, but I have a slightly different perspective," or, "That's an interesting idea, but have you considered?"
Those are great ways to acknowledge the other person's viewpoint while still sharing your own. It encourages a more open and productive discussion. What about giving feedback at work?
That's another tricky area. Saying something like, "Your presentation was terrible," is obviously not the way to go, even if you have serious concerns.
Definitely not. You want to be helpful and constructive, not demoralizing.
Exactly. Try phrases like, "I appreciated the research you put into the presentation, and perhaps we could focus on the delivery next time," or, "Have you thought about adding some visuals to make it more engaging?"
That's fantastic advice. It's all about framing your feedback in a way that's positive and actionable. So, remember to consider the context and audience when choosing your words.
Let's practice. I'm going to describe a situation, and you tell me what you would say using the correct, natural English we've learned. Ready?
Absolutely. Hit me with your best shot, Belle. I'm ready to put these textbook busting skills to the test.
Okay, you're at a coffee shop, and the barista messes up your order. Instead of getting a latte, they give you black coffee. What do you say?
Okay. I think I'd say, excuse me, I think there's been a slight mix-up. I actually ordered a latte, not black coffee. Is that too formal?
That's a good start, but it's a bit textbook-ish. It works, but it lacks that natural, everyday flow. Here's a better option. Hey, I think I got the wrong order. I asked for a latte.
Ah, okay, simpler and more direct. I see what you mean. Let me try another one. What if I want to return a shirt to a store, and it's been a week since I bought it?
Okay, here's the scenario. You're at the customer service desk, and you need to explain why you're returning it. The shirt is still in perfect condition. What do you say?
Right, so I wouldn't say, I wish to return this garment because it does not fit my aesthetic preferences. I'd probably say something like, hi, I'd like to return this shirt. It just doesn't really suit me.
Much better. Direct, polite, and understandable. You're getting the hang of it. Now, let's make it a little trickier. What if the shirt has a small, almost invisible tear?
Okay, that changes things. I'd probably say, hi, I'd like to return this shirt, but I just noticed a small tear in the fabric. I didn't see it when I bought it.
Excellent. You acknowledge the issue up front, which builds trust. Now, imagine you're at a restaurant, and your steak is overcooked. How do you address it without sounding rude?
All right, I wouldn't say, this steak is excessively well done and therefore unacceptable. Instead, I'd say, excuse me, I ordered my steak medium rare, but it's come out well done.
Perfect, clear, polite, and specific. You stated the issue without being accusatory. Remember, tone is key. What if you're at a party and you don't know anyone?
Oh, this is a classic awkward situation. I wouldn't say, greetings, I am unfamiliar with the individuals present at this social gathering. I'd probably walk up to someone and say, hi, I'm Theus. I don't think we've met before.
Exactly. Simple, friendly, and approachable. You're breaking the ice without being overly formal. Now, let's say you're in a meeting, and you disagree with someone's idea.
Okay, I definitely wouldn't say, I must respectfully disagree with your assertion, as it lacks empirical evidence. I think I'd say, that's an interesting idea, but I'm not sure it's the best approach because, and then explain my reasoning.
Fantastic. You're being diplomatic and offering a counter-argument. That's how you disagree politely in a professional setting. Let's try one more. You need to ask your boss for a raise.
Okay, this is a tough one. I wouldn't start with, I believe my remuneration is inadequate in relation to my contributions to the company. Instead, I'd say, I'd like to discuss my current salary. I believe my recent accomplishments and increased responsibilities warrant a raise.
Excellent. You're being assertive and professional, focusing on your value to the company. You've really mastered the art of ditching textbook English for real-world conversations. Now it's your turn, listeners. Think about some common situations you find yourselves in and practice crafting natural, conversational responses.
So, today we learned how to navigate real-life English situations where textbook phrases just don't cut it.
Remember to always consider the context and your audience when choosing your words.
Keep practicing these scenarios, and you'll become much more confident speaking English in any situation.
Remember to subscribe to Uncle Sam Fun English for more lessons like this.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.